All right, we are back for our latest episode of Boardroom RevOps, where we're bringing you valuable tips from RevOps experts so you can make it to the C-suite. Again, I'm James, co-founder of AccountName, next-gen BI solution for RevOps teams. A little bit of a different format today, and I'm super excited. I'm joined by Lou Shipley, and we're going to get a look into the executive's perspective of RevOps. Lou, thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, James. Great to be here.
Before we dive in, I'd be remiss not to do the resume read. Lou, you've done so much. There's no way I'm going to get all of this right. So my research has you as a two-time VP of sales, three-time CEO, board member of 6 different software companies. What else is important to know about your background here?
I'm a sales guy. That's probably and that's why I love the topic of RevOps. I guess the other thing is, and the way we met was at Harvard Business School. I've taught about 5,000 students, various sales classes there, and before that I taught at MIT Sloan. And so that's where I spend a big chunk of my time now, working with trying to find the next James Geyers.
And I think we owe you. I think the tips from the entrepreneurial sales class were directly correlated with us closing our first few deals as non-sales folks by training. So we'll always appreciate you for that.
Yeah, and you've gotten good at it. You know what to do.
Yeah, always room to improve. I think, Lou, the last fun fact here is that did you start, am I remembering correctly, that you started your career selling knives, encyclopedias, something door to door?
Books door to door. Yeah, books door to
Books
door.
door to door.
And encyclopedia, Bible guides for 2 summers to pay for college. To Trinity College, which is I got my Trinity Entrepreneurship Center swag on today.
I imagine if you can sell books, you can sell anything. But okay, so we're living up to the name of this podcast today, Boardroom RevOps. Clearly, Lou has been in the boardroom plenty of times, so really excited to get his perspective on RevOps and how they can showcase well to the board and be really effective. So let's just dive right in. I always ask each of our guests, Lou, just how they define RevOps to start, because we've asked 20 people and get 20 different answers. I'm curious how you define the function.
Oh, it's a great question, James. And by the way, it's changed over the years. In the 35 years since I graduated from Harvard Business School, it's changed. It used to be part of finance. It never was a separate own area until, I don't know what it was, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. Then it was more sales ops, and then given that the revenue lines in SaaS businesses, but also there's so much in terms of logo hunting, growth, and renewals, and managing churn, that RevOps is probably a better term for it. But it's really everything that you need to know to understand what I always called, in my last company, Black Duck, what I called the single version of truth. Like, what is the single version of truth about where the business really is? And the nice thing about RevOps is that it can be an independent function and not influenced by either marketing, sales, or finance. And so my last company, it was so broken when I got there that I had RevOps report directly to me as CEO until we fixed it.
Yeah, I'm actually curious. Tell me more about that. We talked about this a little bit in our class actually together, like where RevOps should report. So is there any more to double click into there around why it should be a standalone function, or your perspective on why you rolled it up to the CEO for a time?
I mean, that in that context, I was a wartime CEO and it was a wartime situation. And so I needed that single version of truth without any other influence. And I needed to learn it myself so that I wasn't influenced by whether finance or sales. Earlier in my career, it always sat in sales, reported to the head of sales. And that didn't necessarily mean it's bad. When a company's functioning really well and the organizations are connected and following a common goal, it can live really in any organization. I just had to have it in my own reporting to me so that I could know what I reported to the board was actually factually correct and that I wouldn't miss my forecast. Because it's the hardest thing to do in sales is to consistently make your forecast. The best salespeople are the ones that are consistent.
And so I think that's also a good segue. So I wanted to ask you, what, as a CEO, are you really looking for out of the RevOps department? So the two things I heard so far are just like a source of truth that you can trust and a forecast number that is reliable. Are those the two main priorities for you from the RevOps department, or is there a longer list there?
There's a lot more than that. I guess it evolves over time. Like in an early stage startup, when you're forecasting your accuracy, especially if you're selling in the enterprise, is not that good. You're trying to get at least a set of data that shows to the board that you know exactly what's happening in the company. And you're not doing the make a quarter, miss a quarter, which is no way to live. I actually got terminated as a CEO for going through that. And so that's why I really believe in RevOps. But I think part of it is what it says to the organization about transparency and being transparent with all your employees about the true status of the business. Everybody wants to make something sound better than it actually is, and you don't want to be too negative about how badly you're doing. But the role of RevOps is to give that transparency of understanding where is the business. And as you get more capable and better at it, you can build a real math equation about where you are, and you can really start to predict within a quarter how you're going to do and start to understand with the data that RevOps and analytics RevOps gives you, are we going to miss and by how much, and when should we notify the board that we're going to miss? And so if you don't have that, you end up notifying the board after the quarter that you missed, which is just a bad thing to do. You won't stay a CEO very long if you do that. So I just found it's so invaluable, and the analytics and the tooling that you can use to really understand the business is critical. But the other thing I found it to be really helpful with was to be able to have more of a real-time board meeting, whereas instead of just sending out PowerPoint or static data, you could answer questions live real-time. What's the discount rate in Europe? Or how much are the reps making here? You just pull up the report.
Yeah, and that's actually, as a shameless plug, what we've seen as value of accounting too, is how do we get these board metrics actually going in real time across data sources. So I'm glad you called that out.
Yeah, it's so big. It's so big. And just on that, James, think about it not just from the CEO's point of view or the RevOps point of view of finance or sales. Think about it from a board member's point of view, because ideally, as a board member, you shouldn't have to wait for a board report to see how the business is doing. You could have reports for the board to see, here's how we're doing. And the more you know, and the earlier whether things are good or bad, is just very helpful for everybody in a company.
I'm sure there's so much to this question, but I think a lot of folks that are probably listening and that are in the maybe mid-level of their career within RevOps haven't seen a board meeting live. And so could you actually just break down at a high level, like why that predictability is so important in a board meeting? What's happening in a board meeting? What are board members expecting from the CEO and the business? And like, why is it so bad to make the quarter, miss a quarter, and not be able to have that predictability?
Yeah, well, we could spend all of our time just on that question because, and you remember from some of the classes we taught at HVS, how do you forecast to the board? How do you get the information across to them so they know that you know what the state of the business is or why you missed? Because if you say you're going to miss and then you don't know why, or if you say you're missed and make the common mistake of, oh, but I think I'll make it up in the rest of the year, the board starts to lose confidence in the CEO's ability to truly understand the status of the business. And that's just a bad thing. Now, you're going to miss, and not everybody makes it all the time. It's just having the data and transparency and honesty about why you missed and how you need to get better. Some companies have what I'd call a culture of optics, of just trying to make everything sound better or look better than they actually are, and that's a natural thing to want to do. It's like going to a circus and looking at a circus mirror. If I looked in the circus mirror and I wanted to see what I look like, maybe I'd be 6'5" and blonde, but I'm not. I'm 5'7" and short old guy, right? But I am what I am, and you can't get better until you're really honest with where you are. So I think that's the role. RevOps helps you build culture around transparency of the data, of the true status of the business.
There's a trend right now to talk about RevOps being a strategic function. The argument for it might be that they sit across the entire customer journey, and if that kind of thinking isn't strategic, what else would be? But I'm curious, were you looking for any sort of strategy or strategic thinking from a RevOps team, or did you see it more as just like that truth teller?
Yeah, interesting. No, it's more than just the truth. I think it can help you build product SKUs. I think it can help you understand discounting strategy, product pricing. I think it can give you this insight into the data that's happening and help you, if you're using the RevOps data in all the different functions of the company, it should help you figure out ways to solve different problems. I'll give you an example of this. You may remember the Wasabi case. I'm on the Wasabi board. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, they were doing great. They decided to pivot to the channel, and they were selling direct, and they decided to add a reseller channel. Now about 60% of their business comes from the channel, which is terrific. But what they learned was they could come up with a new SKU if they sold to the channel, and they came up with reserved capacity storage, which is different from the pay-as-you-go model. So the RevOps information gives you the ability to think about, what if I created a different SKU? And that's going to give you insight into how do my customers want to buy? And that's really important to think about how your buyer is coming along on their journey to buy your product and to approach things from the buyer's perspective. I think RevOps gives you the data to prove that out.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. I appreciate your perspective. We chatted a little bit about org structure. Where should RevOps report? Tell me a little bit more about the classic challenge. I feel like I hear it at least every week of sales and marketing aren't aligned. And that can mean a number of different things. Before we talk about solutioning, do you have any perspective on the root cause of this problem? Is it a problem you've even experienced in like your roles leading companies as well?
Absolutely. And it took me until my last gig at Black Duck where I finally got sales and marketing really aligned and on the same team. It was partly because of the two VPs, Adam Clay and Bob Canaway, but it was partly because we agreed that we were all on one team. We were going to measure one set of metrics. And if marketing says I want to be measured on leads or a vanity metric, in my opinion, like marketing qualified leads or something that doesn't actually drive business, then you get the wrong set of incentives going on, and marketing wants to be measured on something that doesn't mean that it's sales in the business. And so here's where I think that the source of the problem is. Most of my background is on B2B enterprise and B2B businesses. Sometimes marketing wants to be evaluated on a B2C model, brand and all that kind of stuff, which is important if you're Coca-Cola or if you're like a billion-dollar company, your brand stands for something. But when you're a startup trying to survive, marketing should be doing only the things that help sales. In smaller companies, it's more about survival mode. What do I need to do to get the next set of customers so I have a right to exist? RevOps plays a critical role here because they are that single version of truth to tell you that what sales and marketing are doing are driving the actual deals that will actually close.
That's great. Yeah, I feel like attribution is so important on actually
Mm.
figuring out what's happening and getting marketing focused on the right stuff that actually matters. Then sales can work those quality leads, and I think that solves the misalignment issue in a lot of cases. I think we covered forecasting a bit, Lou. We just covered like sales and marketing alignment. Any final processes or cadences that RevOps runs that you think are really important to the business that we haven't covered today?
I think it's one of those functions that can spread to more things. I had a terrific RevOps leader and a guy named Ed Loftus, who's now CFO of Black Duck. He was head of RevOps for us. And what he did was we brought in a lot of sales reps, and he was responsible for helping the first reps get their first deals. And we called it first blood. And then once a rep closed a deal, they knew what it took to get a deal. Ed would actually let them cut some corners on the first deals just to get the deal done so they felt what it was like to close the deal. It's such a rush to close a deal. And then on the next subsequent deals, he would say, now you have to follow all these processes. So the RevOps function becomes critical in terms of a deal desk and making sure your deals are clean. And if you were going to go public or get acquired, that everything is totally kosher. And if you don't have that function, you can have deals that aren't right for the company, they aren't the right duration. So having that as a senior role with somebody who's truly understands how it affects the valuation of the company is really key.
That's so great. I haven't actually heard that first blood example before, and
Oh, yeah.
allowing some corners cut. It sounds like it definitely feeds into that really good Black Duck culture that I've heard so much about from the Black Duck alumni.
And the other thing that we did there with the head of Ed, the head of the RevOps, was he ran what we called the war room, which was the last week of the quarter. We kitted out an office with camouflage and pictures of George Washington and General Patton. And like it was war, right? Business is war. Like it's hard to make your quarter, just really hard, especially in an aggressive growth company where you're stretching the boundaries of growth. And the role of RevOps there is so critical in terms of getting it done, but getting it done accurately, cleanly, so that it's a totally clean deal.
What is happening in that war room? Is it just like all hands on deck to go through every open deal, make sure we understand next steps, make sure we're looping in the folks need to be looped in, getting quick responses on deal terms? Or is that kind of what was happening in the war room, or what were the activities?
James, it can be a lot of different things. In our case, it was the central place. Anyone could walk in and say, how are we doing? It was like, oh, you had a whiteboard with all the deals on it, and you could see things coming in. Because in any typical quarter, you're going to get deals that come in that weren't forecasted. You're going to get deals that don't come in that are forecasted. And then keeping tally of this and having culturally celebrating deals when they win, ringing a bell, all that kind of stuff. The war room was a central repository at the end of the quarter. So no one messed with it. People would decorate it with their favorite historical war thing. One quarter we were really behind and the forecast didn't look good. The head of sales said, if we do make this quarter, we're going to go down to the Constitution in Boston and we're going to set off the cannons. We made the quarter, and then everybody in the sales organization went down and heard the big cannon boom. There's just fun stuff you can do to get everybody rallied around a common cause, was making a quarter.
That's awesome. I love that. Thanks for sharing the anecdote. I want to switch. We're coming up close-ish to time here, Lou. RevOps investments. A lot of things I hear from the RevOps community is that for many companies, it's a really understaffed function. Many Series B, C companies will have 1 to 3 RevOps folks. They're completely underwater doing so many things. We talked a little bit about the value of RevOps already, but you've sat as the chief executive officer. So, the purse strings stop at you. Like, how do you think about investing more in RevOps when the alternative is always investing in more revenue generating resources around like sales, for example?
You're evaluated by not just hitting your numbers, you're evaluated by what your cost of customer acquisition is, how profitable your company is, how efficient you are. So I think RevOps really drives the efficiency part of a growing sales organization. In the early days, it's one person doing 10 jobs, and then over time, you eventually get your first full RevOps person. And then the combination of a RevOps person with software automation and tool sets, tooling that help you do things in an automated way is what you're really looking for. I found that you could justify RevOps by looking at how fast they and enablement ramp sales reps. So if you typically takes you 6 months to ramp a rep, you could pay for more of this if you said, I think I can get it down to 3 or 4 months or even less. And that's with all this tooling and training and thinking about the ways to make people more efficient. So I think the role of RevOps also with sales enablement really helped us do that. The best companies I see really do invest in it because it pays off.
Yeah. So it's really business case around efficiency. So if someone, to get really tactile, was coming up to you, assuming it made it this far up the chain, like, you want to understand what the investment is, exactly how it's going to help folks become more efficient, and what the estimated impact is. Is that kind of a fair summary?
Yeah, and you mean it's a business case analysis, it's an ROI, and it's really about you as the chief executive and you as the senior staff understanding the data that you can trust. One of the things that you need to be able to do is set up your definitions. They're not going to be right. You're going to get them wrong, but get them as good as they can be and then start measuring against those, and don't change the definitions. Because if you change the definition, you just have to wait for more data and a couple more quarters before you know if you're getting better or worse. So it's all around getting together, having a common nomenclature, and then agreeing on what sets of data we're going to look at to make decisions.
I'm really glad you made that point. We get the question a lot in accounting of, I don't feel good about the quality of my data. Is it even worth standing up XYZ dashboard? And I feel like the answer is almost certainly yes. Measuring something, as long as it's not completely off, is better than nothing. You can still get directional improvements over time as you slowly but surely improve the data quality. So I think that's a good call out.
The worst thing that you can do is, miss a quarter, say, yeah, but our definitions are wrong. Let's spend a few weeks and redefine it. And then you miss again. And we got to redefine it. We can't tell you if we're getting better or worse because we still know you're not going to get it right, but you got to get it close. And that's where it gets back to, you got to have people all in the same compensation system and not having thinking they can evaluate themselves differently than what truly matters to the business.
Yeah, really well put. Last category of questions here. Curious to get your take on it. So you mentioned Ed as a really great RevOps leader for you. I'm curious to hear your perspective. Like, what are the traits of the best RevOps folks that you've worked with?
So I think it's a combination of enjoying being in a sales environment, understanding how hard the sales role is, and not being viewed as somebody who's just analyzing salespeople. You want to be a member of the team, and I've seen a lot of my students actually over the years move from RevOps into CRO roles, because the day is here of the cerebral CRO. It's not that backslapping sort of Alec Baldwin type guy in Glengarry Glen Ross. It's really about data and efficiency and getting to the single version of truth. The combination of someone who's analytical but also understands sales and gains the respect of the sales team is the key.
Do you have a perspective on how RevOps folks can make it to CRO? Like, what it takes? Do they need to hold a bag? Is it enough to empathize really well and understand the role?
I'll tell you, James, we launched this new class at HBS after you graduated. It's called B2B Sales and Distribution, and it's about larger company sales organizations, maybe public companies, Fortune 500 companies. And where you see what happens there is the sales organization gets really big. You'll have had RevOps, but you'll then start a sales strategy role, which often combines with RevOps. And then I've seen in 2 cases we had come in, one was Samsara, the other was IBM. IBM's ecosystem business is run by a former head of RevOps and sales strategy. So yeah, in larger companies, it's a way to get promoted. You don't have actually had to carry a bag because the business is so complex and so analytically driven that you can move into a CR role from RevOps or from sales strategy.
Interesting. Do you have a good pulse on the difference between sales strategy and RevOps? What are the work that the strategist is doing?
Yeah, so RevOps would be the data, the analytics of understanding the forecast and what's working, what's not working, and accuracy of the business. Sales strategy is really when you get larger and you have multiple routes to market, multiple go-to-market motions. You might complement a direct with an indirect and an OEM and a systems integrator, and it starts to lay out
what are the pros and cons of those different go-to-market strategies, the different prices, the different segments of customers you get at different price points from the role of the strategic leader of that organization.
Yeah. Okay. That's clear. I'll put you on the spot here. Are there any memories where a RevOps leader like really wowed you? I feel like for context, the role people often say you don't really notice RevOps until something's going wrong. So as a leader of companies and on boards, did you ever have an experience where you were like, wow, that was really well done by this RevOps person?
Yeah, he had such good data on what was actually happening that was different from what the head of sales said, that I just was like, wow, this guy's really analyzed it. Because that's what RevOps is doing, is giving you the real information based, and it's not being critical of sales. It's saying we actually have a 4-month sales cycle, not 3. Or we actually have, for this segment, we have some reps that are really sandbagging and we can get those deals in. So it's like this information of analyzing the numbers, but also understanding the psyche of salespeople. Because once you put a microscope under a salesperson and say, I'm going to look at all your deals as it moves from stage 1 to stage 5 or something, they're going to play the game just like anybody does. They're not going to put it into the category where it's going to close. So you start to see the variability of certain reps so some will sandbag and some will overestimate. And then that's the role of RevOps, is like, here's where you're really going to come in. Here's what's actually going to happen.
That's great. And then the converse, and I hate to finish up the discussion on a more negative note, but any pitfalls of the job? Is it just the opposite of what you described, or are there any other pitfalls where RevOps has gone really wrong?
The pitfalls of the job are when you don't have it. You're flying blind, you miss a quarter, you miss multiple quarters, and you don't know why. And that's the pitfall of not having it. And that could be because you haven't put somebody in charge of it, or you're having one person who really doesn't know how to do it, try to do it, because it's a hard job. It's a really hard job. The pitfalls is if you don't have this, like James, I get a lot of people that ask me to help with their sales organizations. The first question I always ask, I did this yesterday with a guy I met. I said, what's your favorite sport? He said it was ice hockey. I said, oh, if you were to describe your sales organization, would it be a youth hockey team where 2 or 3 kids can skate, but no one knows what's happening? Or is it like a high school or college team? Or is it the Stanley Cup champions? What is your sales organization? So yeah, it's a youth hockey team. That's the problem. You don't have one of the basic building, but you got to have RevOps. You got to have data and analytics to understand how are you doing so you can start to forecast. Like a youth hockey game, you don't know if it's going to be 10-1 one way or the other because no one knows what they're doing. But as you get more mature and put systems in place, put people that know what they're doing, you get coaching and somebody who's run a team before and seen what good looks like, then you start to build forecasting consistency. By the time you're up, in the NHL, you should the outcome of the game.
Really well put. And I'm so glad that you snuck in a hockey reference before the end because I was counting on you to do it. I know you're an avid hockey fan. Lou, thanks so much for the time. This is such an awesome kind of look behind the curtain and into the boardroom, actually, which is the whole point of this podcast. So I am eternally grateful for you for coming on. And it sounds like we might have you on later this summer as your book releases.
Yeah, once I get my book, Unlikely Entrepreneurs, out, my co-author Trish and I are working on it. We'd love to come back and talk to your group again.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Lou. Appreciate it.
You bet. All right, see you.